In Minecraft, there are a ton of different things you can buy and sell to villagers, and some of these lesser known trades are totally better than others, so in this video I'll show you 20 villager trades you didn't know about. Wood is an item that is not generally associated with villager trading. However, in this trade we can directly turn wood into emeralds. All you have to do is take some logs, craft them into planks, then take those planks and craft boats. Go up to a fisherman villager that's been upgraded to master, and you can trade one boat for an emerald, considering the fact that one boat is made out of 5 planks, and you get 4 planks for every log of wood. It's basically like turning one log into one emerald, which is really overpowered, and the type of boat that you sell to these villagers to get your emerald depends on the biome of that villager type. So the way that works, the jungle type villagers as well as the desert type villagers will want to buy jungle boats from you. The plains villagers will want to buy oak boats. Also, the villagers that have the snowy and taiga clothes will want to buy spruce boats, and then the savanna villagers will of course buy acacia boats, and finally the swamp villagers for whatever reason will buy dark oak boats. The villager with the butcher profession is often overlooked because some of its starting trades are kind of annoying, having to trade large amounts of meat for emeralds. However, when we scroll down to its final trade, you notice here it's actually really good. 10 sweet berries for an emerald. If you don't know a lot about sweet berries, they are one of the easiest items in the entire game to get. In fact, probably the easiest food source there is, since all you have to do to plant them down is just right click on the ground. You can even see this eager villagers coming over with an emerald in its hand to buy the sweet berries from us. And of course, if we zombify this down, that's literally only 1 sweet berry for an emerald. Now, if you find farming the sweet berries to be sort of frustrating because it's easy to get hurt in them, all you have to do is take some slabs and put them on top of the sweet berries just like this, then go along the side holding down right click. You cannot get hurt by those sweet berries at all. There are a lot of villager trades that are unique to the cartographer, but one of the rarest ones, which I also think is one of the best, is the trade of 7 emeralds for an item frame. Now this may seem like a bad price, but of course with zombification we can get that down to 1 emerald for an item frame, and it's fairly rare for a villager to offer this trade. So for example right here we have 4 cartographer villagers, and I've gone through over 15, and out of all 15 they usually just have 2 different colored banners for sale, but as you can see with a small number of them, you sometimes get an item frame there instead of one of the banners, and this trade is absolutely worth it. Now the reason why the cartographer villager is actually selling item frames is of course because if you fill out an empty map, you can then see things on that map, and if you put that map on an item frame, there's a special integration with that to have it hang up on your wall really nicely. We're about to get on to a bunch more amazing villager trades, but before we do, be sure to leave in the comments down below what's your favorite villager trade and why. Out of all the villager professions in Minecraft, farmer villagers definitely have some of the best known good trades in it, but one of the lesser known trades that I definitely think you should start using is the emerald for a cake trade. Although this may not seem like an amazing trade, as cakes are definitely a limited use item, one thing that does make this be a really good trade is if you consider how difficult it actually is to get cakes the normal method. So for that you're going to need 3 milk buckets, then you need 2 pieces of sugar, 1 egg, and 3 wheat, and arranging it in this non-stackable crafting recipe, meaning you can only make them one at a time. That will give you a cake, giving you your 3 buckets back. Then of course you'd have to return over to a cow, right click on that a couple times, get all your other ingredients, and repeat the process. Not every single farmer villager has this cake trade, but for the ones that do, it is really overpowered, and cakes can be used for a lot of different things. The tipped arrow is a really great item for certain uses, like for instance trying to give certain mobs a status effect. However, the issue is that getting these arrows can be difficult, as it does take dragon's breath. However, this is where the Fletcher villager trade comes in. If you go to a Fletcher and you trade with it all the way till it's a master, on the final trade we have 2 emeralds and 5 arrows to be converted into 5 tipped arrows of a random status effect. Now this one happens to be jump boost 2, which is good, but of course you can also get these in all kinds of other types, like let's say poison instant damage, health, night vision, invisibility, and of course much more. And so for example, by just trading with villagers a little bit, we now have the jump boost 2 effect, so we can easily jump up multiple blocks at a time. From just doing a bit of villager trading, we were able to get 5 of those tipped arrows for a pretty good price. It's a very cold and icy day for these fisherman villagers. However, they have a trade to keep you warm, and that is 2 emeralds for a campfire. Campfires are used very often for decoration and builds. As you can see, for example, when they're not on fire, like these ones right here, they can be used to look like structures, supports, or even lattices. And as well as that, let's consider how easy it is to get campfires normally. Well, the campfire crafting recipe is 3 logs, as well as 3 sticks and a piece of coal. Even if we use charcoal, that equals about 4 logs worth of wood, and all of those for an emerald is a great deal. But this is made even better if you consider what happens when you break a campfire without silk touch. If you break this without silk touch, what do we get? 2 pieces of charcoal. This doesn't seem that good if you just crafted this normally, but when you're buying it from villagers, it is extremely good, because that means that this is a way that you can actually get charcoal for emeralds. If you level up a cartographer, you'll eventually unlock the Woodland Explorer map. Now this is bought with a compass as well as some emeralds, and with this item we can actually find the Woodland Mansion. Now the Woodland Mansion is of course one of the rarest structures in the game, although it was made a lot less rare in Minecraft 1.18 and onwards. If you're wondering how to follow one of these maps, it's kind of easy. Just find the dot on the map. For us it is in the bottom right corner. The top of the map is north, and of course all the other directions of the map relate to north, south, east, and west. And so because of that, this means we should go to the northwest to find this. So just pull up your F3 screen, look north, then look west, kind of go between those, and go this direction. And eventually, after a very long time, this map will start to fill in, the dot will get larger, and you'll see kind of more specifically where you should go to find that Woodland Mansion. Leather workers deal in all things leather, but there is one leather type item they sell that you may not be aware of, and that is the rare saddle item. Now saddles are only obtainable a few ways in Minecraft. One of them is finding them in loot chests, another one is getting them from the Ravagers, but overall both those methods are fairly difficult. However, with the leather worker as one of its final trades, for a rather cheap price, only about 6 emeralds, you can get yourself a saddle. And there's even a very high limit on this trade. You can get a ton of different saddles really easily. With the starting price being so cheap, this really unlocks the ability to tame even more horses in the game than ever before, because with unlimited saddles, there's nothing limiting you from getting as many horses as you want. As horses, donkeys, skeleton horses, mules, and all of these other rideable mobs are pretty easy to tame. A lot of the reasons for different projects and activities inside of Minecraft is getting good supplies of building blocks. But what if I told you that the librarian villager, already most people's favorite villager, also has a great way of getting us tons of building blocks? Well, it's true. It's with this trade right here, 1 emerald for 4 glass. Now with the limit on this trade, that means that every single time this villager restocks, we get 48 glass. And of course with a bunch of these villagers, you get yourself stacks and stacks of glass every single day that you're trading with them. Of course glass is usually only made from sand, which is a limited resource item inside the game, and so this actually makes glass completely renewable, and makes all the tireless hours of collecting sand only be needed for concrete, however not needed for glass itself, which of course can be used for basically anything you want, including all the dyed variants of it. As another great building block trade, we have the shepherd. Now usually they have some absurd trades, like let's say 18 wool for an emerald, but once you get past those, we actually have some really good things, which is the fact that you can buy wool in any color for only 1 emerald. Now this may not seem like the best deal, but it is if you consider how easy it is to get a good source of emeralds late game. Also, these trades go all the way up to 16, which means that if you had a bunch of different shepherd villagers, you could get yourself infinite wool of basically any type you wanted very simply. And with trades that are available that can turn, let's say, 1 piece of stone into 1 emerald, being able to turn piles and piles of stone that you have into an infinite source of colorful wool, I think is a very good trade and one that people often overlook. Also, if you don't already have a large wool farm, or let's say don't have a farm that produces wool in these colors, this is also a really good way of getting yourself some quick wool pretty easily. You may have had this situation in Minecraft when you've been mining a ton, even at the correct layers, and you just cannot find any Lapis Lazuli, or if you can, it's in very small amounts. That's where this really convenient trade from the cleric villager comes in, as only at second unlocked trade we have 1 emerald for a Lapis Lazuli, because of course not only does this mean that we have a good way of getting the beautiful lapis block, again just directly getting that from the emerald block, but also So when we're wanting to do enchanting inside of the standard enchantment table, we have that ability to get the lapis for that without having to go mining and potentially not find it. Of course, without a bunch of these villagers, it's not the best source of this item, but if you wanted to, let's say, make it absolutely humongous build out of lapis lazuli, then getting yourself a large number of cleric villagers to get that lapis is not necessarily a bad idea. And there's also the added benefit of it being a good source of blue dye. The stonemason is a very overpowered villager inside of Minecraft, and a trade of it that I'll often discuss is the stone for emerald trade. However, there are some other trades this villager has that are just as good, but are sometimes overlooked, and that's the fact of selling andesite, diorite, and granite for emeralds. First of all, this trade starts at only 16 andesite, diorite, or granite, depending on the trade, so it's more easily able to be discounted to one of these items for an emerald. But as well as that, a lot of players don't use very much andesite, diorite, or granite, so these could be viewed as even more garbage than, let's say, smooth stone. So this is a really great source of emeralds inside the game, and I would really suggest trading all your andesite, diorite, and granite that you don't want into emeralds, because although this item is good to be polished and built with, it can also be great for an additional source of emeralds. Placing down a loom can give you the shepherd villager, and as a chance for one of its trades, we have one pair of shears for 2 emeralds. You'll notice here that it doesn't always start out with this trade, so simply break and replace the loom until you get that as its first trade. Now this trade is incredibly overpowered, and what makes it be so overpowered is the fact that you generally have to have 2 pieces of iron to get shears. Also, most players are not going to be, let's say, enchanting their shears with unbreaking or mending, and so because of that, most players, even late game, need a good source of shears, and this can start to cost a ton of iron, as of course it's 2 iron to make a pair of shears. So to turn 1 emerald into 1 iron, you can start to see why this trade is so good. Even in late game worlds, having a massive source of infinite shears is so useful, and also if you're making automatic wool farms, which require tons and tons of shears, this can be really useful for there as well. Most villages in Minecraft have a bell at them, but that's actually pretty rare if you consider how many villages there are. If you want to get yourself, let's say, a couple stacks of bells, this can be almost impossible by just harvesting the naturally generated ones. But the solution is rather simple. It's to use the armor smith, toolsmith, as well as weaponsmith. Because although it is a very expensive trade, for 36 emeralds, you can buy yourself a bell from any of these villagers. This is the only renewable source of bells in the entire game, but it is a pretty good source of them, especially considering that with a bunch of discounts, maybe even including the Hero of the Village effect to have an especially potent discount, you can still get these for fairly cheaply. Let's say collecting some snow, and even just hitting the bell with a snowball, that can actually be enough to make it go off, as you can see here. And of course they also put the spectral effect around pillagers, and they make villagers rush into their homes. Another really great trade that people often don't use that you can get from the shepherd villager is 4 carpets for an emerald. Now this may not seem to be a good trade, but I'll tell you why it is. Of course, the standard price is 1 emerald for a piece of wool, so we can assume that's the value of that item. But 2 pieces of wool only gives us 3 white carpet, which means that normally if we're buying directly from the shepherd villager, you're talking about 3 pieces of carpet costing 2 emeralds. But this way, 1 emerald gives us 4 pieces of carpet, or of course 2 emeralds would give us 8 pieces of carpet, which means it's almost 3 times cheaper than crafting it from wool that's bought from that. What this also means that if you want to make, let's say, some map art, this can be a good option. Now map art's basically when you place down different colored blocks, and on an empty map they can appear to show different pieces of artwork, and we could use those to draw out a face that you can see on the map right there. Getting a quality food source in Minecraft is really important, as you want something that'll replenish your hunger, give you lots of saturation, and also is stackable. Now one of the best items for this is the steak or the pork chop, but farming a bunch of pigs or a bunch of cows can take a lot of time and effort that could be used better doing other things. That's where the butcher comes into the equation. Now if you take a look generally, the butcher will have trades where we're actually selling at pork chops or steak for emeralds. However, there's also trades that the butcher will commonly have where you can buy 5 cooked pork chops for only 1 emerald. Considering the fact of how easy emeralds are to get, this is a fantastically good source of infinite food. Why is it so good? Well, let's say the trade of maybe golden carrots for emeralds only gives you 3 golden carrots. loadouts. But with this, if you look, by just 2 full trading rounds with villagers here, we already have 2.5 stacks of cooked pork chops. Cartographer villagers will sometimes buy glass panes for emeralds. Now you might be wondering, why is it that the cartographer would buy glass panes? It's because one of the things you can do with glass panes is use them to lock maps at the cartography table, which more or less means that the contents of that map can no longer be updated. And so because of that, the cartographer will buy the panes from you. But what makes it so good is that this can be discounted to 1 glass pane for an emerald. And then because of the other trade I did discuss earlier, where you can buy 4 glass blocks for 1 emerald, this actually gives us an infinite emerald source. By basically taking the emeralds that we got from the cartographer and using them to buy glass, then crafting that glass into glass panes, then taking those glass panes and selling them to our local cartographer, you basically have this infinite loop of buying and selling glass. Another trade you may not know about that the shepherd has is dye being turned into emeralds. Now this is definitely better with certain dyes over others, as let's say for example brown dye is generally harder to get than red dye, but let's take a look at this trade right here. We have 12 pink dye for an emerald and 12 white dye for an emerald. So to start off with, of course, this can be discounted for 1 piece of dye turning into 1 emerald, but also white dye is really easy to get because of course you can turn bone meal into white dye, but as well as that you can actually turn bone meal into pink dye for even cheaper by bone mealing peonies, and then you can take those, put those in your crafting grid and get 2 dye per peony. And so with this discounted all the way, you can literally turn 1 bone block into 18 emeralds, or you could turn 1 bone meal into 2 emeralds. Ideally you want to go with trades that the dye that you sell to the villager is a dye that you can get from duplicating tall flowers. Not only is it difficult and annoying, but it's also super dangerous to go into the nether to slowly harvest up glowstone dust. Especially if you have, let's say, a hardcore world, we have tons of different dangers, including fall damage ghasts, or even let's say hitting the walls or roof of the nether with elytra when trying to find these clusters of glowstone that sometimes hang in the roof of the nether. But what if we made all of this easier by getting this netherish block from the overworld? That's right, there's actually a really easy way of doing this, and it involves this villager trade that a lot of people don't know about, that is from the cleric. As a journeyman level trade, you can have 4 emeralds turn into 1 piece of glowstone. The trade limit on this is pretty high as well, so you can get yourself a bunch of glowstone quite simply. Also broken with fortune, basically every single piece of glowstone will turn into 4 glowstone dust. One of the final trades that the cartographer as well as the shepherd villager offer is banners for emeralds. Now it's not very many emeralds that it costs, so it's really easy to get this down to the minimum price. And you may be thinking, why is this such a good trade? After all, banners are a pretty cheap item, but they're not as cheap as you'd think. You see, each banner requires 6 wool as well as some sticks, and so if you want to craft a bunch of banners, you actually need a very substantial amount of wool, and this can really be a barrier in the banner making process if you're like me and love using different types of decorated banners, because if you have a banner and you have banners of the same color, one of them has patterns, one of them doesn't, you can copy those patterns over to that banner for absolutely free. And combined of course with this really cheap villager trade, it turns banners into something that are fairly difficult to get, into then a type of signage so you can plaster up all over your entire world. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video about 20 of the best villager trades that you don't know about in Minecraft. If you did, make sure to press the like button, subscribe to see more content like this, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye!